Hi, I'm pleased to be today talking about it systematic with you all. So I would like to welcome you all today to speak about parliamentary office-friendly interface. As Louis also mentioned, I'm Sarah Fern from Bússola Tech, and I also work with accessibility, especially for neurodivergent people. So for starting our debate today, I would like to ask you to present yourself. So I will start it alphabetically. So Jonathan, could you, Fadhel, sorry, could you please present yourself?
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. I'm glad to be here with you today. New faces for me, but I hope that that can be a good start for other collaborations maybe. So I'm a senior strategist here at the House of Commons administration in Canada, and I am leading the accessibility, the digital accessibility program here in digital services in the administration of the House of Commons.
Thank you. Jonathan, can you present yourself, please?
Yeah, hi, my name's Jonathan from NovaWorks. So I'm the CEO and founder of NovaWorks. We've been working with parliaments for the last 15, to be honest, probably the last 17 plus years, and really about providing advice and general direction around technology trends and how to actually really digitize and move forward with citizen engagement.
Thank you. Patricia, the mic is yours.
Hi, everyone. I'm Patricia Roedel. I'm a journalist and public servant of the Brazilian Chamber of Deputies. And for 6 years now, I've been working in the website management sector, which involves user experience.
Thank you. Robin, please.
Hi, I'm Robin Treistman. I am the Deputy Director of the Knesset website. I've been involved in the Knesset website since its beginning in 1997. One of my unofficial roles is I am also in charge of accessibility. So when things go right, everyone says yay, and when things go wrong, they all blame me.
Thank you, Robin. And Stephen, please.
Hello, everyone. Very happy to be here. Stephen Dwyer from the U.S. House of Representatives here in Washington, D.C. I recently finished 20 years in a leadership office in the House of Representatives. I sort of specialized in all things technology. I did a lot of tech policy, but digital communications. But also I was computer science undergrad, so I did a lot of civic tech too, building some apps and stuff. And I now work for the institution of the House, where I'm very happy for the past 6 months, focusing only on that last part, doing lots of civic tech and building apps and working on accessibility and other issues as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, now we will move on for our next round of questions, starting with Mr. Fadhel. Well, Mr. Fadhel, what strategies can be implemented to ensure that the Legislative House's digital interfaces are accessible to all members, including populations like the elderly, the disabled people, for example? I think you are on mute, sorry.
Okay. That will be better. So here at the House of Commons, we are like especially for the last, I would say, 5 years, focusing more and more on accessibility, making sure that what we are publishing is accessible. But since the Accessibility Canada Act was voted, and we are now working around that, I think we did a good jump in terms of strategizing better everything that needs to be done on that matter. So here, what we are focusing on to make sure that all first members of parliament and the House administration employees and the public through our public websites can have access to all our documentation and information is around mainly trying to focus more on user testing. So we conduct regular user testing with sometimes with members' offices, sometimes with members of the public, and with internally with the House administration employees too, when or prior launching applications or new products, new websites. So we focus on user experience, usability in general, but more specifically here on accessibility. So we test, we have we focus on the compliance with the most recent accessibility standards. Of course, we're talking here about WCAG 2.1 for now. 2.2 will be released very soon. So we are already training and having some documentation around that. Also, in terms of training and awareness, we are providing training to all the staff responsible for creating and managing digital content on accessibility best practices. So to make sure they understand the needs of different user groups. In terms of recruitment, also we recruit employees with I would say with impairment. So we will be onboarding 2 new accessibility testers who are themselves visually impaired, and that will change the reality of even our teams, our different product line teams, and the way they will approach and they work on different products. We are also working on the voting systems, for example. We worked with for the e-vote application we launched during COVID to allow our members of parliament to be able to vote remotely and securely. We worked closely with some members of parliament offices and also government members who are, some of them are have some impairments, to make sure that everything is covered from an accessibility point of view for this type of application who can be very, very sensitive. And we do also public education. We help our, of course, member of parliament offices understand how they can have access to accessible documentation and content, how to use also all kind of assistive technologies when it's needed, so training. And also we have feedback mechanisms, and we are working more and more on implementing more user-friendly feedback mechanisms for the member of parliament and for the public, so we can have it started to work very well, and that is a way to improve our digital products. One last thing I want to add is that we created 2 things. So one is the Accessibility Secretariat, who is working on all aspects of accessibility here at the House of Commons, and we have a plan for the it's 3 years, but it will be improved in the next year. And also we created a digital accessibility program, which is also aligned with the plan, the 3 years plan that was already approved, and is doing more than that. So that I hope can give you an idea about how we approach that here.
Perfect. Thank you for all the points that you shared with us. So, Mr. Jonathan, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's some really good strategies, especially when you're looking at international standards as well from an accessibility point of view. I think just reflecting back on my previous sort of question and answers with Robin as well, I think we were sort of going through and saying, I think that one of the key elements around things being accessible is choice. You know, how people wish to consume the parliamentary data is really a choice. So whether it is traditionally the PDF approach or whether it is accessible then on the website or whether it's in a computer format, as an example. And one of the things I think, which is probably an important part of it, is that the content has to be readily accessible and readily usable for all types of users. And like if we look at, like, for example, the elderly, I know, for example, my mother doesn't have the internet, does not have a mobile phone. But when you sign up, something like for insurance or something like that, you must put a mobile phone number in. It's now mandatory. So to me, you know, that, you know, we're not thinking necessarily, and again, it's not necessarily with parliaments, but we're thinking even that whole process of signing up to subscribe to content or to look at content requires some sort of form of digital element these days as well. But if we can make that content accessible for, say, journalists or for other, you know, parts of society, which they can then relay that into then, you know, formats in an easy way, then we're also then, you know, making sure that we've got more reach into those sort of other areas which are not necessarily digitally aligned to. So I think it's important from a parliamentary point of view that when we look at our digital interfaces, we also consider an interface is the data itself. So I think if we consider, like, we all try to do a really good job. And again, if you look at the House of Commons in Canada as an example, they've got a really good strategy around accessibility. They've got, you know, government mandates around how things should be presented, what are the formats, what are the standards. And I think coming back down to standards are really important when you look at those types of approaches as well. So I think consider data when you look at a user interface too, because, you know, the user interface is usually a prompt to get to, say, more information, is probably my thoughts.
Perfect, thank you. So Patricia, would you like to comment on that question?
Yeah, I think an accessibility institutional program with maybe annual goals should be implemented on parliaments. It's the easiest way to reach the accessibility compliance. Some features are very easy to put into effect, such as minimal color contrast or font size, but others, like publishing an alternative text for each image, may need a cultural change in the organization, depending on its volume, on the work, the effort. If we're talking about a website truly accessible for blind people who use screen readers, it will demand more effort and more ambitious goals like subtitling real-time transmissions or having a sign language translator demands money. That's why the Parliament really needs an official accessibility program to plan these improvements over time and reach the accessibility compliance and standards. It's not an easy thing to do at once.
Yes, that's a easy thing to do, but as Jonathan mentioned, and as Fadhel, for example, cited, it's an intention to do. I think that at least just the intention starts the whole processes. Thank you.
Here in
Robin?
Brazil, we also have an accessibility secretariat, which takes care not only about digital accessibility, but also all the physical accessibility as well.
Exactly. Thank you. Robin, would you like to comment on that question?
I will comment on this question by telling a very quick story. In 2016, October 2016 was the date that the accessibility law in Israel was going to go into effect. And early 2016, we, the Knesset website, were nowhere ready for that to happen. And the entire, I would say, besides the parliament, pretty much the entire country went into panic, because if there was a website that was not accessible, then it was subject to lawsuit. And lawsuit means money. And we're talking about back in 2016. And when, and again, like I said, we were in a complete panic. And what happened was some startups, some high-tech startups came up with solutions that would take your website and put a layer of JavaScript code over the entire website, making it accessible within a day. So these companies got very popular within a few months. And then in September of 2016, the Knesset actually passed the law saying that they were going to postpone the law coming into effect by another year, and everybody whoosh, was very happy. Meanwhile, just again, similar, that's just our history and the pressure that we were under to make the website accessible very quickly. We knew from 2013, we had 3 years, and of course, everybody waited till the last minute. But in the end of the day, with all of that, thank God we were able to come out on the other end saying that we are accessible. Later, I can tell a few more details about you know, having the accessibility come from an external source versus the website being internally and properly accessible. More on that later.
Thank you, Robin. And Stephen, would you like to comment on that question too?
Yeah, sure. So in the United States, we've had a fairly strong disabilities law since the early 90s. And so originally it wasn't applied much to websites at all. But you know, it's fairly vague, and it's just asked for reasonable accommodations, you know, whatever those are. And ours, similar to yours, Robin, have been mostly defined by lawsuits, by courts, you know, but that's mostly just in the business sector, you know, what's required of each business to accommodate for various disabilities. But on the government sector, there hasn't been much enforcement. And so it's mostly like we just should be doing better and should be doing more. But for a long time, we weren't doing a great job. And I think, you know, around, you know, 10 years ago or so, with the formation of the first digital service that really sort of tried to standardize websites across the federal government for the first time for us, that's when we first really started making major web disability improvements. You know, we've got a great US design system from the US Digital Service that's been implemented, and we use it even in Congress, even though it's from the executive branch. And it's, you know, really been adopted widely across the whole government. And, you know, of course, these things, like you said, Patricia, like contrast and everything, those are all taken care of through the design language. But we were fortunate in Congress that 4 years ago, we had the creation of something called a Modernization Committee. And I think it's been really powerful in a lot of ways, especially, well, including disabilities. It was formed a special committee, and it had actual members of Congress that would look into these things. And about half of it was technology, And the other half was just sort of all other sort of administrative things that just hadn't been updated in Congress in forever. But a lot of it was technology, and a big part of the technology part was the disability access part. They had whole hearings with actual members, not staff, not administrative offices, but actual members focusing on, why are our websites not that great for disabled people? And it wasn't just websites. One of the members that testified at that hearing on disability access was in a wheelchair, a member of Congress in a wheelchair. And we actually spent a good amount of money and redid our actual floor, our chamber, so that he can go up into the speaker's chair in his wheelchair. We also added a women's bathroom because the building's, hundreds of years old. There was only one small bathroom near the chamber, and it was a men's room. And so we have more and more women, and they're like, what the hell? So so similarly, they gave us a directive, and they gave us money, because it costs money to look at all the websites. And so, we have 600 congressional websites, and most of them are centrally run at the CAO's office where I work. And so our team has been at it for years, and it's hard work getting all, but we use, like Robin was saying, a lot of outside tools, more for grading, but also for improving. But like for grades, because it's a sliding scale, it's not either accessible or not accessible. It's just something you got to work at. But we were able to raise a lot of our regular member websites for members of Congress, that were grading using commercial scores, maybe 50s. We got them all up into the 90s now. And it's just something that we are now going to hopefully focus on continuously to always keep it in the spotlight.
Thank you, Stephen. In fact, improving accessibility is a continuous work. So it was really insightful to hear from all of you the plans to improve the accessibility in many ways. And before we move to our next question, I would like just to highlight some insights that I also took note about what you all said, like the creation of a program in accessibility, or having a secretary or area dedicated, at least part of the team dedicated to accessibility, and to reveal all the process and in physical and digital ways, and also thinking about other means to improve accessibility, as Jonathan mentioned on the example, to get more accessibility to journalists, for example, that impacts many other kind of population that consumes this parliamentary data. And also Robin and Stephen talking about the disability committee test, and also how this is based also in the national law, for example. So we will move to the next round, and I would like to start with Jonathan Ruckert. Jonathan, how do you envision the future of digital interfaces for legislative house applications? And what emerging technologies or trends are you considering for future improvements, for example, the near future or the long-term future?
Yeah, I think let's sort of start off with trends. I think the world has evolved. That's a very broad statement, but we're learning from our mistakes, I think, is one of the key things. So, standards are evolving. So when we look at our trends, we're seeing a lot more wider adoption. You have those standard design guides, as Stephen was saying. There is, a standard design guide for the US. I know in Australia, we've got a standard design guide. If you look at the big players like Microsoft, Google, all those sort of other elements, there are what we call standard accessibility guidelines as well to do that. So even if you don't have, say, your own government version, if that makes sense, there are other players out there who have got freely available material. You know, you have like what we call fluent design, or you have like the material version, which is like the Google one, or, you know, and again, Microsoft and Google and those sort of other big players, they've invested a lot of money. And that's something, again, which can be scarce within a parliament. So they've invested money in their own user interface experts. They've invested in alignment with the WCAG standards as well. So even if you're, you know, just starting out on the journey from an accessibility point of view, there are existing resources out there, you know, and again, emerging technologies. And when we say emerging, that's also they're evolving as well. So they might be already there, but they're continually being updated. So you can then implement those, you know, in your own websites or your own information sets to make sure that you are being compliant in there. So, you know, when we're looking at trends as well, you know, around accessibility, I think, you know, coming back to my original statement around choice, is that people nowadays, especially if you look at, say, the younger generation, they consume data and websites and information in various different ways, which we didn't do, you know, 5 years ago or 10 years ago. And I think it's really important that, you know, there is a lot of choice in terms of, you know, what those sort of interfaces and those sort of technologies are being used for. So I think the emergence of speech to text, but also even now text to speech as well. So flipping on the other side. So, you know, there are things when we look at accessibility, and I think one of the things I'd like to sort of, you know, mention is that, you know, web accessibility can also benefit people without disabilities as well. So we look at cost and we look at, you know, time and say, oh, we're only focusing on people, say, with disabilities or need a screen reader or, you know, auditory or those sort of other things. But on the flip side, you know, we could then enable it so people could actually use their mobile phone or their tablet or their smartwatch, you know, to interact as well. So there is actually additional benefit by being compliant with accessibility that, you know, isn't necessarily being perceived as a cost benefit until they realize, oh, but it could actually be a cost benefit.
Thank you, Jonathan. It's good that you mentioned that, something that I also hear and say often, that improving, for example, accessibility is good not only for disabled people, but for people in general, because when we improve accessibility, we are improving access for many kinds of populations. So Patricia, do you want to comment on that question too?
Yeah, I'm talking more about the content distribution here. In Brazil, we are now starting to think about integrating content on our TV channel and website in such a way that the viewer could vote in polls, see additional data about the deputy who's speaking, and also ask questions in public hearings from his own TV. That's what we are starting to work on now. But I like to think about attracting citizens' attention by offering them personalized content. This is not any new technology, but I don't see parliaments using it. Neither are we, by the way. But our navigation statistics shows us that who enters the Brazilian Chamber of Deputies website is an occasional user. He's looking for a bill, a debate, or a speech, or a voting that specifically interests him, and he won't come back, not frequently. And it would be educational to show this person other bills or debates within the same theme, to take him out of the bubble that presents him only one point of view on the subject he likes or he's looking for.
Thank you, Patricia. Very good insight about the relational content, or even more basic technologies, like, not technologies, but means like cloud of words and things like that, that can also relate the different contents to present different types of view, or related information, very good. And also I think that you posed that was really interesting is the use of statistics and numbers to base your argument, to base your and future improvement or insights, for example. So thank you. Robin, would you like to comment on this question too?
You know, one day we're all going to need accessibility help, okay? Please God, that we should all reach our 90s and not be able to see so well, okay? Hopefully that one day that will happen to all of us. And then we will, again, we will need assistive technologies and, you know, okay, why 90s? Why stop there? Let's, you know, let's be 100. So what I wanted to say, going back to Jonathan's comment, is that, and I was actually, all of you kind of said this, is that when you make your website accessible, it's good for everybody. And you know what? Besides, Jonathan mentioned cost effective, but there's going to be an added bonus. After studying, I had a course in SEO, and it turns out that the simpler, the more accessible a website is, the more likely it's going to show up higher up on search engines. So that's a little added bonus that, that maybe people didn't think about. So yeah, go ahead and let's make it all accessible for all of us. and it should be cost effective, and we will all need it one day.
Thank you, Robin. That reminds me a discussion that I was listening to about the alt texts for images and things like that, that also help to improve, for example, a website in searches in general, in searches in platforms like Google, Instagram, and so on. So this point was very interesting. Thank you. Stephen, would you like to comment on this question too?
Yeah, sure. So some trends that we're seeing here in the United States Congress, I think similar to what Patricia was saying is that, we're really looking carefully at all the people that come to the congressional websites, the members of the public and how they want to interact with Congress. One thing we've discovered is that they, 90% of the time, they just need to do about like 8 things or maybe 6 things. And so a lot of those things, used to be PDFs and, or complicated, things or, clunky. And instead, we're turning those common user journeys into, very simple, modern sort of appy-like experiences. And so that's something we're spending a lot of time on. I think the trend is, like a couple of years ago, everyone was trying to make an app on iOS or Android and everything. I think we're very much more just web apps now, just like for more accessibility and interoperability. And there's some special use cases for mobile apps, if you really need notifications or camera or geo or whatever. But yeah, so we're spending a lot of time on just specialized web apps that just really solve very specific problems. Because there's a lot of them, we're spending a lot of time on building the sort of the best underneath platform that makes creating all the new specialized web apps as easy as possible. And so, low code platforms, for example, and having everything sort of containerized and modularized so that like we're not sort of locked in with any particular vendors or and so we can sort of plug and play different things, but also so that we don't have to redo things like design, accessibility for disabled people, web mobile, mobile friendliness. I mean, all those things we just want to sort of get fixed once for not just the variety of apps, but the future apps. And then, of course, these go and live on different websites and everything. But so those are sort of the trends that we're spending a lot of time on here. I've been working closely with in my new job with the newly formed House Digital Service here in Congress, where we're sort of rethinking a lot of these things. We already had an existing very large web team who are great, but we're just trying to sort of implement all these user-focused design, agile methods.
It was good, interesting what you said about do not reinvent the wheel, for example, and modularize the areas of a web app, for example. So it's really insightful because sometimes we try to do all the things again and again and again, starting from scratch and starting from zero, and sometimes it's just It's just in need of some adaptation, testing, getting feedback, listening, or getting feedback to improve mobile apps and interfaces, websites, and so on. So thank you for all your considerations in this round. I would like to move to the next round, starting with Patricia. Patricia, now we'll focus just a little bit also on citizens too, further than the members of the House. And I would like to know if a legislative house imagines designing digital literacy programs or resources to help citizens understand and navigate legislative interfaces effectively. For you, what are the 1 or 3 pillars would you like to recommend them to look for or to be aware of?
Well, in terms of both process efficiency and ease of use of an interface, a good benchmark is the private sector because it aims to profit. If a store doesn't take these aspects very seriously, the consequence won't be only an unhappy citizen, but an unhappy customer who will go somewhere else to buy. But our customer doesn't have anywhere else to go. We're the primary source of information. Think about the interfaces you frequently use, your grocery store, your bank, social media, Amazon, and so on. You don't need a tutorial to learn how to use them. On the other hand, imagine how we, at this room, would design a page that gives access to all content in the world, in all categories and formats. How complex would it draw it? With how many filters, tabs, tooltips? Few of us would think of an interface as simple with just one field as Google search. So our main challenge is precisely to create an interface that doesn't require a tutorial. The user's short-term memory should be completely available just to understand the complexity of the legislative process, not to strain itself to navigate the interface. Our brain's effort should be dedicated to the content and not to the form. Imagine what a waste of time it is for a citizen, us. I'm sure you have passed through this many times. What a waste of time for a citizen is to try to understand each interface of the Chamber of Deputies, the Federal Senate, his city hall, his country's ministries, the Justice Service, and so on. It's a lot of bureaucracy. We must think of the citizen as our major stakeholder, the one we must please. So we should have more empathy with our user, respect for his time, and try not to draw an interface that needs a tutorial. Answering your question, I recommend these 3 pillars. Write in plain language, an easy language. Draw an intuitive interface and test. Test it with your user before launching. You can make easy tests with 5 users, but these users must be precisely chosen. You have to pick them to really to have a statistically correct result of your test.
Thank you. And I personally think that when you at least get 2 pilots that is writing plain language and test, you are able to connect to the citizen, because if something is written in plain language, the citizen, for example, understands better in a better way, and it's able to test better too. So if the person have to choose just 1 or 2 pilots, for example, the pilots that you mentioned are really good. So Robin, would you like to comment on that question too?
I could not agree any more with what Patricia said. I think that I completely agree. The easy language and the easy interface is really the secret to getting to your largest public, basically. And My question is going to be later about testing, so I'll have my own thing to say later about the testing. So I'll get back to that later.
Thank you, Robin. Stephen, would you like to comment on that question?
I also really liked Patricia's 3 pillars, so I'm not going to add any more pillars, but I'll give one example that I think is a good illustration of what she was saying. You know, we have, like I was saying, we're trying to make all these web apps that do the common things. And part of it is because every member was doing it different ways on their different websites. But of course, that's confusing and people move and have different members of Congress, and then everything's different. And so, of course, centralization is also helpful if we're able. Now, of course, lots of members think they're their own, you know, fiefdoms. So that's natural too. But so we have this one app that's you know, a lot of constituents go to their member of Congress because they want help with a specific problem with the federal government. So, for example, you know, we have a terrible passport backlog right now. So, you know, they always are saying, "Hey, Congressman, help me! I've been waiting for months. I can't get a passport. I got plane tickets. I got to get out of here." You know what? So that's a common problem. And if you go to we have a centralized form, but if you go to the form, the first thing it says is, what agency do you have a problem with? But nobody stopped to think, people don't know which agency makes passports. Like, that's not common knowledge. You know, is it immigration? Is it State Department? Is it, you know, and so that was just a huge mistake that was going on for years. So like literally half the people all across millions of people, you know, were going to this and they were picking the wrong agency. And then of course it just breaks and the data is all messed up. And so that's just a good example that you got to say clear language, think about the average person that maybe doesn't have extensive knowledge of government, and think about what is just generally accessible and frame it for them, not for you. You know what the agencies are, but no, you want it the person who needs help. What do they need help with? Make it easy for them. Yeah.
Thank you. Fadhel, would you like to comment on that question especially?
Yes, absolutely. So thank you, Patricia, and really I think we all agree here. We're talking about users, about testing. I'm a UXer, I'm a user experience specialist, and I can't agree more. So for me, all is about the users. We often forget about the users. We focus about, okay, the business and the business objectives, and okay, what do we want to reach, what our objectives are, but we forget about the users. Well, here at the House of Commons, we try as much as possible to go back to the user, to test more and more. We're doing surveys even before doing an application, a website. We try to collect as much information as possible to understand, and also to go back to our where the money is coming from, you know, like to tell them, guys, it's not about what you think that is good, is about what the users are telling us. And that's what we're trying to do more and more. And hopefully we're lucky that we have management here at the House. That is very open, and we are more and more using this methodology. So user-centered design is, for me, very, very important. I want to come back to also what you said in the previous question, and I think there is a direct relation with this. Like whatever we do for accessibility, for example, okay, who didn't push the the wheelchair button to open a door and use whatever type of closed captioning, whether it's in a conference or to watch a movie, or sometimes. So I think it benefits to all of us, and it's all about taking into consideration the needs of every and each user with the specific use cases. And as Stephen was saying, like, who knows what department is this? So then this leads me to say that another very important pillar for me is plain language. And that's also what Patricia said previously. And at the House of Commons, it's part of our plan. I told you that there is a plan, an accessibility plan that was tabled and approved, and plain language is one of that. So how do we want people to understand what we're talking about if we continuously use like wording that is really hard to understand for average citizen? So that is something we are working on. We started working on here at the House of Commons.
And just before moving to Jonathan, and I'm just curious about how are the House of Commons dealing with the plain language and implementing the plain language, for example.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So yeah, that's what I think. Thank you.
Okay, Jonathan, would you like to comment on the question?
Yeah, absolutely. It's hard being last to comment. We've got such really good breadth of experience on these sort of thoughts. I think, like, just to reiterate, I think user-centric design is the most critical aspect and the most critical pillar. To actually do that, though, you really need to define your audience. And you know, if people were around when Robin was sort of doing her presentation last, where it's saying like, well, whose website is it anyway? And understanding what those, you know, pillars are, even from your user point of view. And one of the common traps which we do find is that the business actually really thinks they're doing user-centric design, but they're actually doing what we call business-centric design. And a classic example, you know, which Stephen said, was that the first field is, well, what agency, you know, do you want to, you know, redirect this to? You know, people have no idea of, you know, what that particular agency is. And that's what I call business-centric design, because the people who are designing those interfaces are business people, right? So, because they think it's intuitive, doesn't necessarily mean that the next person sitting next to you is going to think it's intuitive either. So I think, you know, the classic sort of thing around, you know, if you are dealing with a thematic sort of type of topic, you know, there are ways which we can then say, well, actually, if you're talking or, you know, entering information about passports, we could automatically link that to this particular types of agencies, or at least filter the information, you know. So when we actually are saying, well, actually, what common terminology do we want to use? So, and again, it's thinking about it from an end user point of view, not a business user point of view, because the business has to consume the information which is getting, say, sent to them. And yeah, sure, it wants to try to make the business's life as easy as possible, but it's not necessarily making the user's life as easy as possible. And that's really how we're going to then have a detriment to then the citizen engagement. And again, you know, accessibility is all about then how do we increase citizen engagement? And I've got some thoughts again, you know, when we come to testing, et cetera, and some of the newer ways of doing things. And we'll get to that during further questions. So.
Thank you, Jonathan. So we'll move to the next question, starting with Stephen Dwyer. And the question is, which elements do you consider crucial for legislative houses that are eager to improve legislative interface that facilitate cooperation among the members and the constituents, for example?
Sure, thank you. I've spent a lot of time thinking through this and actually trying in a lot of ways. I think, you know, the things that members just need, that when the people of the public need specific services, I mean, I think that can just be like, you know, good modern apps like we've been talking about this whole past hour. And that's where a lot of the work's happening now. I think it's a lot more complicated and difficult when I think Patricia's mentioned it a couple times, when the letting the public weigh in on the legislative process, comment on bills and issues, and that's a lot harder. And so I because it's harder, I find it a little more interesting. I think whenever you do that, there's lots of great options using web technologies. A lot of them boil down to content moderation, which is probably what a lot of social network companies are all very familiar and frustrated with, because so that's the real struggle, is that you can design good, modern, interesting ways for the public to weigh in on issues before Congress, but when they do, you inevitably get lots of messy comments and everything, and so there's lots of technical tools to do content moderation, but of course a lot of it boils down to manpower too, to actually just make sure that that everything is okay. But I think it's most important is that people think that's simple, and that you can just accept comments on a bill, for example, and have a big board. Well, it's not simple. But it's still, that should not be a barrier to trying. I think you can get very valuable work. One important principle is that you need to structure the incoming communication. You can't just say to the public, what do you think about healthcare or taxes? Then you'll get rants and just not messy information. You have to structure the conversation where, what do you think about this very specific proposal, much more detailed. And if you say anything about anything else that's not related to this very specific thing, well, then we're just going to automatically hide it. Or you can even do cool things like crowdsourcing to police the being on topic. So that's something that I've spent some time on and had some success on, but I think it's an interesting area.
Thank you, really insightful. Robin, would you like to comment on that too?
I'm going to agree with Stephen, and even maybe take it even a step further. I really think it's not about the technology. I think it's all about the willingness and like you said, the manpower. What happens? I mean, Israel has around 9 million citizens right now, okay? Let's compare that to the several hundred million in the United States. So let's use the United States as even a better example. Or even, let's go back to my small country, okay? And say, what happens if there is some kind of a platform and the Knesset makes a very specific question? In other words, you just said, let's not make, what do you think about taxes or something like that? How, what do you think, if we ask the public a very specific question, what happens if 400,000 answers come in? What do we do? Seriously, how do you handle, again, 40, I said 400,000, what happens if 40,000 come in? What happens if 20,000 come in? In other words, at which point do we say, whoa, this is just way too much and it is not manageable? So then therefore, some of the questions, well, do we therefore not even try? Interestingly enough, the Knesset website in 2001, all right, had an open forum in one of the committees. It was, again, this is way before its time. And, a lot of people didn't even have internet yet necessarily in their home. But what happened was a committee, there's one particular committee, the Science and Technology Committee, that whenever it had its meetings, there was a screen and there was a place for the public to type some messages. And then there was a moderator to let those messages go through. And then these messages would appear on the screen. And the Knesset members were able to look at the screen and decide if they were going to comment on what that person from the public said. Now, again, remember I said, if you had several million possible people to speak here, and in the end of the day, again, back in 2001, it boiled down to the same 4 people showing up every time, and being a little bit nunniks, okay? And so then what do you do with those? And in the end, again, like I said, it was really before its time, and they dropped it after one after one Knesset session, basically. In other words, after like about a half a year, they said, you know what, this is not working, we're not doing it. Since then, from a technology perspective, forums such as, that are based on technology such as Facebook and Twitter and other, sorry, not Twitter, X, okay, whatever, any other forums. In other words, these technologies exist where many people, many to many, and many can discuss or whatever. But again, I don't see, call me a pessimist. I don't know, I'm usually very optimistic about stuff, but I don't see how it could be manageable in those terms. Sorry.
Wow, thank you, thank you. Fadhel, do you want to comment on that question?
Mm-hmm. Yes, so for me, it comes back always to really if there is, as Robin was saying, a willing to understand better our citizens or the users, our users. If you're talking about interfaces we are providing or products, or we are providing them so they can consume the information and understand better what we are doing, what our lawmakers are doing. I think it's about really having that motivation to understand truly, and I insist on truly, what they are, what these people want, what these people needs are, and put ourselves as much as possible in their position to be able to understand better what should we offer to them, how should we present things to them. As Stephen was saying, we need to be very specific. We need to structure whatever we will be asking or trying to get, so we will have more clarity. So, and it's about a balance between keeping the transparency and openness and the confidence of the public in whatever information they will find and they will get from us and from what we are providing them. So once again, maybe it's my user experience background, and that comes back every time, and I think that's why I'm here. Otherwise, I don't think I would be here. It's about understanding the user and about doing everything possible to, I would say, sincerely, get what the user needs and align that with the objectives from a business perspective. So once again, user-centric design is very, very important here. Comes back and back and back again and again, and trying to get the feedback as much as we can from the users to improve. The rest, I will not talk about technology, and of course we know all the rest. Inclusivity, accessibility, plain language, simplify the interfaces, the UI, and working more and more, as we are doing here at the House of Commons, on user flows. Like before we start anything, we have user flows. It's very important, and the right personas, as Jonathan was talking about before in the previous question, I think. So yeah, that's what I think.
Perfect, exactly. Understand the needs of the user, for example, and using frameworks to help to understand, like you mentioned, the persona. There's a bunch of persona frameworks that can help to facilitate the process of thinking and designing the persona. So thank you for your comments. Jonathan, would you like to comment on that question too?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things I'd like sort of people to consider is when asking for like feedback from citizens is understanding really what you're trying to truly do with that information. And like, do you like, and one of the things I think is important to actually ask is that, you know, if you put a free text box in and say, please provide your comments, is that actually really what you're wanting? Like in some respects, are you just interested in a trend? Are you interested in sentiment? Or are you interested in, is the majority of citizens negatively opposed to this particular, you know, detailed question? It could be a very detailed component. And I was talking with one of the ministers for digital innovation, I think earlier this year, and they basically just said to me, said, you know, John, you know, one of the best things we sort of ever did was that we took what Facebook did and we took what Instagram does, and literally they put the thumb up or the thumb down, you know, as part of our interface. They didn't necessarily use and want detailed commentary at certain stages. Now, certain stages you probably do, but to get really the public opinion, you know, they were sort of analogizing it to some respect and say, you know, if you look at, say, let's say the younger generation or the mid generation as well, who are familiar with those sort of types of technology, where they're scrolling through, they'll find something very interested, they hit the thumb up, they hit the thumb down, to really give that sort of more instantaneous feedback. So, you know, I think when we look at sort of that user interface side of things, there are simple options and there are, I suppose, complex options as well available to you. And I think using, you know, understanding how, you know, the lawmakers and the members want to really use that information in a meaningful way, because, you know, if you open something up to 9 million citizens, 100 million citizens, where you say, what do you think about taxes? You're going to actually spend more money and more time filtering out the non-relevant information and deduplication of information, then it is actually the use of garnering that support. You know, you may as well just open up to a public forum, or, you know, you may as well sort of, you know, walk on the streets and knock on the doors and get sort of more, I suppose, relevant feedback, because really it's about empowering the use of that information and the use of that data to really drive those informed decisions. So, you know, my advice is, again, you know, don't overcomplicate things, you know, if you don't have to. You could have a very simple, I like it or I don't. If you look at, like, for example, the UK House of Commons, when you look at their voting on their website, you've literally got a thumb up or a thumb down, whether you, and from that, you know whether a vote has been passed or not. You don't need to actually look at the number because your eye is actually drawn to the thumb, not the actual number to start off with.
Thank you, Jonathan. Patricia, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, agreeing with everyone. I think to achieve real cooperation, we need many successful steps other than the interface. And I can tell you because we have failed in some of them, of these steps. Of course, the first one, as we all said before, is to enable constituents to understand what is being said, to understand the legislative process. And here we are talking about language again. Of course, we also need to provide a friendly interface that doesn't simply replicate internal IT systems. But communication is a two-way street. This collaboration must reach the lawmaker in structured data. That's a problem we all have here. So he can effectively analyze it and take it into consideration. This involves more of a programming effort than designing. Maybe AI can enter here for heat maps, for example, or some sort of speech analyzing. An interesting strategy is also to publish the deputy feedback on those public considerations. So you close the communication system and it enables more people and reinforces this collaboration process. Some other thing, there must be also an internal communication campaign to disseminate the results of the popular participation to the lawmaker himself, so he doesn't forget to analyze it. Otherwise, you just have a feature on your website, and maybe the lawmaker doesn't even know what's going on, that results are ready, what people said, what kind of deepness of opinion we want, as Jonathan said. Otherwise, if you don't take care of the whole process, participation becomes only figurative, not effective, only a veneer of democracy, a nice feature.
Thank you so much, Patricia. So before we move to the next question, we can get some points of what we say today, like keep things simple, to modularize things, to know your user, their needs, and watch, and to be more, to understand more the business and the impacts of what you're doing and what you're willing to improve. So I would like to move to our last question, starting with Robin. We are talking about the context of parliamentary operations, and we know that the continuous improvement of digital interfaces, it's a very important thing, it's a paramount. So a fundamental component of achieving these enhancements revolves around the systematic collection and integration of user feedback, as we are talking before, into the design processes. So Robin, what strategies do you recommend to be employed to get their user feedback and incorporate it into the design process for parliamentary interfaces?
Okay, so I might actually say some things here that might make us look not so great, but I'm going to say it anyway. When we develop a new section on our website, we take into account any kind of feedback that we have received in the past from citizens. We take into account the feedback from the different departments in the Knesset that are relevant to whatever the project is. Not only, I mean, with them we don't even necessarily take feedback. Actually, we design and develop together with other colleagues inside of the Parliament. However, after a new section of our website is developed, it undergoes what we would call QA testing. There's actual official QA testing, which is very, very technical that happens, and it happens by a separate department. The Knesset website staff, then we test everything to make sure that all of the wording and everything is good. And then we throw it out to the public. Basically, we skip what Patricia mentioned earlier, those only five people that will go and test, your site. Those very, very important and hand-picked 5 people. We don't have that. We don't, and it's funny because once, we met with a different parliament that talked about, they have a, before they open anything to the public, they send it out to, they have a base of 100 pilot users, and then they get the feedback, and then none of that. We don't do any of that. We send it out to the public. And then we hope, and usually our hopes are they usually come true, that people from the public will be sending us back their feedback. Now, at the same time, I do want to mention that when we do throw it out into the public, the very first contact that we make is to our accessibility advisors. Our accessibility advisors, once there's a new part of our website that is up and running, our accessibility advisors will go ahead, again, based on our request, and send us back a bug report. Usually very quickly, within 2 or 3 days, we get a bug report about all of the accessibility problems that that show up on that particular new site, and that goes right back to the developers, and they fix that right away. Now, besides that, again, if we get feedback, any feedback that comes to the Knesset website, and no, we do not get 20,000 emails with feedback. We actually get, our feedback, we get about 10 to 20 really relevant, emails a day. And if it involves the need to fix something on our website, then right away, we do our best to do that right away. And especially if it's a new site, then it is all, in any case, it is, in its infancy stage. Again, once it's at, I'm talking about once it's out in the public. We have actually a very interesting example that just happened now. The committees now send out for when they want to invite the public to participate, not public, I should say invitees, is that the right word? Invitees for committee meetings. They are sent an email, and on the email, they can click and they can register directly to come to the committee meetings. Now, the email has been redesigned, and it is now an email that is consistent among all of the committees. Once upon a time, each committee sent out an email and each one looked different. So now there is an automated email that is based on the agenda, and it is sent out automatically. It looks good. It's a really nice email with a schedule, and it's got a blue header about what is on the agenda, and then all of the rest of the information that's important for that particular committee meeting. And we got an email back from someone who said, this is not working. And we said, what's wrong? In terms, we had it, by the way, checked for accessibility. And he wrote back, he said, I am getting a blue page. He gets, in other words, the same color as the heading became the background of this email. And we said, wait a minute, none of us were able to replicate this. And he said, you know what? Go onto your Gmail, take a look, do a preview on Gmail and see how it looks. And guess what? Yes, he was right. I mean, obviously he was right. But now we saw for ourselves that this is a real problem. And you know what? Without his feedback, we would have never known that. And this was coming from a person who, from an accessibility perspective, could not read the email, even though, again, it was readable for people whose vision is okay. He could not read it, and because of the contrast. So my point is that, yes, we are designing for users. We are trying to do our best for users. And at the same time, sometimes, again, we'd rather get things out there faster and then have our users get back to us and say, look, things have to be fine-tuned. It's funny because even if we spent another month, 2 or 3 on the testing, we're still going to have bugs that the users are going to send back to us. So that has been our approach for the most part. Again, I would say over 90% of the time, it really, really works well. We get very positive feedback from users about new sections. And if there's something that needs to be fixed, they tell us. People in Israel are not embarrassed to let us know what's wrong. So that's our approach.
Thank you, Robin. Thank you for sharing this example, this real life example. Patricia would like to comment on that question.
Yeah. Well, our approach is this. First of all, we start a new interface by researching the problem we are trying to solve. Sometimes the problem is not there. Sometimes people ask us to have a new interface, and that's not going to solve the problem we are facing. When we prototype it, we make these usability tests, I've already told you. And after launch, we leave a feedback and error reporting button on each new page for 6 months. And we also receive after that complaints and suggestions through the Contact Us link, which is available at the top of the whole website. A very important strategy for us and very, very difficult to achieve is not to make incremental changes based on the opinion and requests of our colleagues, the internal public. Their level of knowledge and use of the interface is very different from that of the external public, it's biased, and making changes based on internal opinion can compromise the quality of the citizens' experience later. Because if you put a little word here, you change a button there, and you're doing that, and after 5 minor changes, it's a complete mess. It's very difficult to engage with that interface.
Thank you, Patricia. Jonathan would like to comment on that question.
Yeah, I think like one of the inherent issues with parliaments is that they can be very risk adverse. So launching a new feature or launching a new part of a website requires a lot of approval, potentially, and a lot of testing and a lot of other things. Whereas I'm definitely more of opinion, like around what Robin is saying around getting things out there for the public. Like that is the role and responsibility of a parliament. And yes, you know, sometimes it isn't polished or it isn't going to necessarily, you know, but the content, as long as the content is accurate, you know, and people can rely on that content, the way which it looks, or if a button is not here, or if it looks a little bit interesting, you know, the sort of general things, you know, the key thing is over they can access the content. And what we also find, I think, is, you know, the business can be focused and really focused on the look and feel, you know, so they're not necessarily interested in the content, and so they want to make everything look really nice, maybe not necessarily functional, but they want to focus on the look and feel rather than the actual content itself. So, you know, I think what we're sort of investigating and what we're sort of doing at the moment is, and if you look at, again, I'm looking at social media companies, etc., they're doing what we call A/B testing. So they might actually start to look at, well, for, you know, 50% of the users, they might see this, but for 50% of the users, they might see this other component. And again, that requires a bit more infrastructure and you know, pre-thoughts and whatnot. But the key thing, though, is that we're getting content out there in a quick fashion. Again, it should be tested like to a point that, you know, you're happy with the overall stability of it and obviously the accuracy of the content. But I think it's really important to not get hooked up on, and I've seen projects literally for one page of a Parliament website take 6 months, you know, to get new content out there. And the content isn't groundbreaking. You know, it just had to go through 20 different approvals to actually get out there. Did it really need to? You know, I'd say that's up for debate. But at the same token, you know, for me, I think, especially in this day's society, you know, everyone wants everything instantly. If you're publishing a live stream of your proceeding, you know, and it takes 5 hours or 2 days or 2 weeks to get a transcript out there, you know, like, to me, everyone wants something a bit more quick now, you know. And back in, you know, the 1990s, or, you know, even 2000s, etc., we had that luxury of, well, you know, everything was getting new, and like we had that sort of luxury. Whereas nowadays, with everything being what I call the instant society, we have to learn to adapt to that and really get content out there as quickly as we can in a meaningful way.
Thank you, Jonathan. Fadhel, would you like to comment on that?
Yes, so very interesting, all this. Robin, her story, it reminds me a lot of, I think all of us, maybe a little bit of our own experiences and what we're living sometimes. So, but I would say that, well, maybe I will give you a little story. So at the House of Commons, we apply the agile methodology. We try as much as possible to be focused around the user-centric design approach. and we involve more and more users and try to get their feedback, do usability testings, and for all our products now we have a QA specialists looking at like having all the test scripts and everything and going through everything, including accessibility. But we had now it's better. But when I started, I was like wondering why, when we provide very sensitive products for members of parliament, like for example, our intranet system and all the sub applications that are part of that, where is the feedback coming from the members of parliament? Where are we testing with the right users? And we had, and maybe, I don't know, I'm really curious to hear that on your side, but here we had really very, very, how to say, we need to follow a lot of processes in order to get the information from the member of parliament, the user who will be literally using every day what we are building. And it was really hard for many reasons. Okay, and I see Robin smiling. So it was hard to reach out to these people. While it's, of course, as we say it in French, the raison d'être, like the reason why we're here. You know, we're serving our members of parliament. Of course, it goes to the public, but we're here to make their life easier and to make sure everything works as planned. So, and I decided, I said, okay, well, let's do a big consultation. We cannot start to rebuild our whole intranet without doing this consultation. And it was not easy to convince. And I'm not only talking about money here. I'm really talking about, okay, the representativity of who are you talking about? Who will you consult? Which political parties? So we did a lot of work to really cover and build the right personas, okay, and cover, do as much as we can a good alignment between our personas and the people will be consulting, okay, the ages, the number of years of experience as a member of parliament, which is different from, of course, like the experience. So we did all that, and I'm so happy and lucky to have also a CIO that also supported that at that time, and it changed the way we're doing things. So so now I wouldn't say it's more easy and okay, we'll go talk, and we go talk to a member of parliament like this, and let's try test the e-vote system we're building for you. No, but it's easier. There was a wall that was somehow broken, and now they understand, they see the value, and they understand how much it's important. So to go back to comment, to answer to this question, I would say that really, I think we need as much as possible to strictly apply what we know in theory, okay, user-centric design, etc. And maybe, like, if we do all the effort we can, maybe we'll get like 50% of that done, 40% of it, and then we will change the mentalities. Okay, it's about us and how we provide, how we approach our own challenges when we talk about legislatures and, you know, and all the products that are very specific we're building for members of parliament or congressmen or, you know, representatives, and for the public.
Thank you, Fadhel. Steve, would you like to comment on that question? And
yeah, I wish I had a lot of time to comment on. I was taking notes from when each of you spoke. A lot of it really hit home. And this has really been a great conversation, but I know we're a little short on time, so I'll try to be quick. I mean, Fadhel, just quickly to respond, very similar in the US Congress. We have, you know, there was a very large wall between the institutional staff that does a lot of the technology versus the actual day-to-day staffers that work for the members and the members themselves. And that was a real problem. And we've actually made significant progress in the past few years of knocking down that wall. It sounds like similar to you in Canada. So that's good to hear. You know, one strategy that we've done is, you know, we formed the digital service team, which is sort of a new team that really, you know, part of its tenets is, in addition to, you know, all the things that we've been talking about. But, you know, the question, Sarah, back to your original question was, you know, continuous improvement of digital interfaces. And so we really believe in that, just iterative design, just iterating on things constantly based on user feedback, and going away from the mentality of the old way of thinking was, oh, a project is done. Like, no, project's never done. You need a healthy backlog and constantly grooming the backlog, constantly talking to people and adding to the backlog and working and actually completing things from the backlog. And again, like Fadhel was saying, like, you're not going to get them all, but, you know, just showing progress and keep doing as much as you can. So one strategy we've made success in that I recommend is actually hiring some staffers from, like myself. So I worked for a member of Congress for 20 years. I happened to be a computer science undergrad and was interested in the institutional technology side. So I knew a lot of the people on the other side of that wall. And then when my member stepped down from leadership, you know, they hired me. So now I'm able to be a bridge over that wall. And it's not just me. They've done that, and a number of other staffers, you know, that know all the other members of Congress and the staffers and can really facilitate that communication that you were talking about, which is so crucial. Jonathan, you know, risk adverse, you know, we struggle with that so much. I really wish, you know, I'm always trying to remedy that, trying to make people be more brave and push more harder, but it is such a struggle that we continue with as well. You know, when we're back to the original question, how we get feedback, you know, analytics, you know, we of course study that quite a bit. You know, even when we're launching something new and a little complicated that we're worried, you know, there's advanced analytics where you can even see where people go and click, you know, it's a little creepy, but, you know, as long as you're consistent with your privacy policies. And I think that, you know, those are powerful tools that, of course, businesses all use. You know, Patricia, I love your point about you have to be able to say no to people. You know, us in legislatures, there's so many important people everywhere. So many of our products were terrible because no one ever says no to anyone. And so, not that the individual little ideas aren't bad ideas, they're often good ideas, but when you say yes to 20 of them, you are no longer simple. You are no longer, you know, easy design and simplicity. And so that's really a problem that we've had for a long time that we're finally starting to clean up. And but anyone who's listening to this probably works for a parliament. Feel empowered, say no to people, even if they're important or members or whatever. You know, protect your turf, which is making sure that you have good web apps and clean and usability. So thank you.
Thank you, Steve. We'll move to the final considerations, and I would like to start with you within 1 minute, please. No, Stephen? I can't hear you. I don't know if my computer.
I'm not hearing him either.
Well, I think he is a little bit frozen. So Patricia, I would like to move the final consideration starting with you until we check about the Steve connection.
Okay, thank you. Well, in the 6 years of experience with usability in the Parliament, I realized that most problems of our user experience are related to the difficult language, not necessarily the interface, design, but language. It seems that our content is for lawyers, for lobbyists, and it ends up distancing the citizen from his representatives. He needs someone, usually the press, to intermediate, to explain what's happening in the Congress, and that's a shame. We must realize that the Parliament itself is the primary source of legislative information. And in this fake news era, I don't know about your countries, but here it's a completely mess. It should be used as a fact check by regular non-specialist citizens without the need of translation. So now I very clearly see the need for someone at the team, at the internet team of a parliament, who can apply in plain language and UX writing. And I strongly recommend this profile on the team.
Thank you, Patricia. Stephen, can you hear me?
I can. I'm back. I froze
Okay.
for a minute there. Sorry about
No
that. Hopefully
worries.
caught most of it.
Your final considerations within 1 minute, please.
Yeah, no, just thank you very much for having me. Yeah, the last point I was making is just sort of empowering staff. The people that are watching this probably work for parliaments, so feel free, feel empowered to say no to people, like Patricia's point, but also hopefully this was helpful and great to hear from all the other parliaments that are on the same page, really, on all this user centered design and iterative development and agile and all those other things that I think are really making a difference to improve legislatures. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Jonathan, would you like to pose your final questions? No, final consideration, sorry.
Yeah, definitely. I think I'll keep it brief. I think make sure that you focus on user-centric design, not business-centric design. I think the way which one person will interpret something will be completely different to potentially another person, and we know that from dealing with, say, members of parliament, where if you're releasing an application or a bit of a website to 500 different members or even 20 different members, each one of them will use it differently. So it is important to understand what your user base actually is, and tailor that really for them as well, not necessarily how you want to use it as a business, if that makes sense. So yeah, but those are sort of my general thoughts.
Thank you, Jonathan. Robin, would you like to pose your final considerations?
Yes. So I am feeling empowered to be able to say no, but it's not really realistic, because then my earlier presentation was, whose website is it anyway? And that's a very appropriate question sometimes, because if the Director General of the Knesset said, I want a page that looks like this, and it has to do this and this and this, and I say no, well, I might find myself on a different staff in the Knesset. I don't think they can fire me, but I might have a different job. So it is our challenge. I think all the people in this forum right here, it is our challenge to be able to really balance that, and to be able to, our no's have to be a lot more elegant. We have to be able to say, what, that's a great idea, but it might be a little bit difficult for the public, or whatever it is. But in the end of the day, we've found over the years that we have put up pages on our site that go up immediately. no 6-month wait here for approval. They go up immediately because somebody in the administration wants it up. And then when the administration changes, we take it down. So that's how things work sometimes. You never know.
It's a wonderful strategy.
Sometimes you can't say no, so you just work within your constraints, and then do what you want later. So but again, I want to, and thank you so much, by the way, for inviting me to participate, and I really learned a lot from you guys, and I really appreciate having been here.
Thank you, Robin, and thank you again to attending so late. I know it's really late for you now, and also thank Jonathan for attending so early. Fadhel, would you like to
Yeah, just quickly, I know that it's very late and we're over time, but I just want to like in 8 years, and I'm coming from the private sector, so 8 years here at the House of Commons. I try, and I think that's what we try probably to all of us to do, to keep always in mind the user and the reason why we're here, which is sometimes we can forget. You focus like you're within like in the technicalities and in the with managing and the teams and other all kind of challenges that can happen other than the user's needs. And I think what we need to keep in mind is really, and as I said before, that's what we try to do here at the House of Commons, to be really to align as much as possible to the processes, to the good practices. As I said before, user-centric design and testing. It's so important, and it's not about the number of users, as Patricia said. It's 5 are enough. Let's keep that in mind. It's about the right personas. It's about the right profiles we choose, and not about the numbers, because sometimes I hear, oh, you're delaying the project, or you're how many people, and like it's not about that. And we need to be, as Jonathan said before, and I like that, like it's sometimes it will cost way more when we don't do things the right way. Like we go back and then boom, like this is public money, okay, and we need to be very careful with that. So let's keep in mind always the user and our parliamentarians and members of parliament, why we're here, and the public on the other side. And let's not forget to always go back and check with the real final end users.
Thank you, Fadhel. So our debate is in the end. So I would like to thank you all for this participation, for this meaningful conversation today. So many thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.